Hello, everyone. This is Terry Mitchell with the Voice on Fire interview series, my interviews with intention. And for anyone who may not have been following along, I love to interview people that I find really fascinating. And they're people that I think of as change agents. They're difference makers, they're action takers, they're people who are on a mission in some way, shape or form to make a difference either in their local community or somewhere across our global village. And my guest today is somebody that I'm looking forward to having a conversation with because we get to talk about two of my favourite things, and it is Andrea Putting. Andrea, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Terry, for the invitation to come on your show. I'm looking forward to seeing where we go with it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Let's see where this conversation goes. And when I say we're talking about two of my favourite things, I'd love to share with our audience about coffee and chocolate, or chocolate and coffee, whichever way we have it. It sounds pretty good to me. So let's start by sharing with the audience what it is you do. Let's go in that direction.
Yeah, so let's talk about chocolate and coffee. So what I do is I have chocolate and coffee breaks, which is all about sharing in chocolate, coffee, and conversation. These simple pleasures in life can really open us up to be able to have a conversation with people. And I believe that that's where we can change the world. And I infuse chocolate and coffee into everything into my life these days, whether it's my social mission of chocolate and coffee day and chocolate and coffee breaks, or whether it's business. There's always starts with a chocolate and a coffee. Mm-hmm. And I really wish that I was with you in person because then we would really be sharing in chocolate and coffee.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I've had my coffee, if that's any consolation. So that's fantastic. I'm really, really thrilled to see that someone can take something as simple as life's two real pleasures, but make something of a social mission out of it. I think that's fantastic. I'm curious to know, though, a little bit more about that in terms of when you say you've sort of infused it across a lot of areas of your life. How does that play out for you? What is it that you actually do with this mission, and explore maybe a little bit more about where you take it?
Right. So chocolate and coffee day is really about breaking down barriers, breaking down the barriers that are between us. So that can be religion, culture, disabilities, sexuality. It can be anything. It started as chocolate and coffee day for religious harmony. But I could see that there is just so many more barriers that are there. And we meet up with people and we just sometimes just don't connect. But I believe the reason we don't connect is we've just kind of got this barrier in our minds rather than finding out who that person is, because it's very rare that you can have a conversation with somebody and not be able to find that something the same about them. So I like to say that opposites are the same because it doesn't matter how different somebody is, there is something that's the same. And so there's even research that shows if you sit and listen to somebody for just 1 hour, that terrible differences will melt away. And so that's not just to that one person, but to the whole social group. So if you have a conversation with someone that you've got a prejudice against, by the time you're finished, that prejudice to the whole social group has gone. Or certainly on the way to doing it. And I've just seen so many examples of that through my life. You watch movies where people who seem like they're from other parts just cannot connect. They do connect if they just stop and listen to each other for a while.
Yeah, for sure. There's one analogy. As soon as you mentioned the word, I just saw this great big puddle of chocolate when things melt away. And it's such a great analogy because with chocolate, when it melts, it's just that delicious, warm, gooey, yummy kind of experience. But if you kind of put the emotional content to that, isn't that how it feels when you get really well connected with somebody? It's kind of warm and gooey and it's all just really nice. So what better than to have chocolate as that way? I mean, not everybody loves chocolate, not everybody loves coffee. I can't quite understand that. I do, but it's that thing. It's like, well, if you don't like the chocolate, I'll just have that little bit extra. A bit in reality, though, what's nicer than being able to take away that word stranger, because we're raised up thinking stranger danger, don't talk to strangers. But the odd thing is, no one's really a stranger once you have a conversation with them. It's about building relationships. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And that's where it all begins. And while, it's this simple concept of sitting down with someone for chocolate and coffee, where that can go is just astounding. I think about that and how simple that can be when you open up to somebody. And like you said, chocolate does that when it melts in your mouth, that feeling of it just deliciousness, but it has all those endorphins that open you up.
Totally.
So when you have chocolate, it doesn't make you feel all tight and constricted. It makes you feel open and willing to share and open to love.
Yeah. Totally.
So when we're able to do that, we do build the relationships. But there's something about, I'm just going back. There's something I've got to go back and explore from when I studied naturopathy way back. There was something about how coffee can spark the thinking process, and chocolate also has that ability. It sparks the thinking process and the creativity. It was kind of like one of those things you have before you have an exams. You have a coffee and it just makes your mind think. So when people come together over chocolate and coffee, yes, it opens them up and allows them to explore, but it also starts to connect with something greater. And I know someone who does cacao ceremonies, and so I've kind of spoken to her a little bit about this, about the power of chocolate to connect you onto a higher level. And you can connect to the spiritual level.
Wow.
So that, if people come together over chocolate and coffee, that's when you can also get into innovation and start sparking ideas. So you start to think about where that possibilities can go from there.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I love when what seems like a natural thing can be backed up by a little bit of science that actually says research shows that this is what happens. And it's like, how cool is that we can actually go, no, it's not just all in our imagination. This is actually stuff that they can prove. And that kind of just reinforces the value of something that we can talk about, but we can discuss that it's not just a feel good, but there's a foundation and a reason for doing this. And something else that kind of came to my mind as you were sharing all of that is, I know that we had a shared experience over the weekend with another festival that you and I were part of. And something that you said during your presentation was, and I resonated with this, is that you said that you're an introvert. And as an introvert, it can be really difficult to find that natural conversational flow when you're completely surrounded by people you've never met before, and there may be natural prejudices sitting there that you don't perhaps know that you've even got, or you're just uncomfortable with, and you don't want to be held back by them, but you're kind of introverted and you don't kind of know what that next conversational starter can be. What I've sort of found is when you're provided with something that's an external that each person can focus on, you can start the conversation by something really seemingly inane, by talking about the coffee and the chocolate. And there's the common element that we're talking about. And then we can find that we can ask questions like, what's your favorite coffee? What's your favorite chocolate? And that then begins that whole conversation. Is that something that you find is how this has all begun to emerge?
Well, I wouldn't say how it began to emerge, but that's certainly what I have experienced. For example, I connected with this man over LinkedIn, business things, and you go, we as women, we're all a bit suspicious about men who connect with us over LinkedIn. So we did a first connect on so it was about business, and we connected first on through Zoom, and then we're going to meet somewhere. And I was really uncomfortable because I wasn't certain about who this man was. Anyway, so we met over a cuppa, and we had this great conversation about about sitting with people and having a cuppa.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of, we actually found this amazing similarity in that I started Chocolate and Coffee Days, but he had been head of, in a corporate situation. He was an Indian man, and he had headed a corporation in India, and he had taken time to bring each one of his employees in personally to have a conversation with them over a cuppa so that they could feel comfortable.
Wow.
And we were the most unlikely
mm-hmm.
business partners, but we actually did connect. We wrote a book together, and he went back to India to work on some of our ideas, but sadly he passed away before we got too far. However, that just kind of highlighted for me about how the most unlikely of people can connect and build something by just making these simple connections. Because quite honestly, if we hadn't have done that, I would have, if I'd seen him in a network meeting or something, I would not have connected with him. I just can't imagine that I would have connected with him. And whether that would have been a bias that I had, probably was. But you just taking that time of connecting with the most unlikeliest people, anything can happen. You just cannot hold that kind of prejudice against people, but just taking the time makes that difference.
Yeah, I think you hit on a really important point there, that we do, most of us, I wouldn't say it's all, can't use blanket statements, but I'm sure we all have somewhere within us a little bit of a prejudice about something, or a bias about something that, and we may not want to be guided in life by it. We probably feel a little bit bad that we feel that way, but we're aware of it. We're brought up thinking something, or we see in society that that's something. And I think it's really amazing, and it's a little part of why I do these podcasts, not only for the benefit that I have, but also the conversations I get to have with people like yourself, is discovering how to let go of those biases by learning more about the people, understand their stories, hear their stories. And as you say, some of the most unlikely people can become some of the firmest friends and business associates and connections. So I think it's really important, particularly in today's day and age, where some pretty strong divisiveness has been happening across our world, where we need to let go and begin to embrace people more. And I find, when I was learning about your chocolate and coffee breaks, that's what I was starting to sort of feel. Wouldn't it be great to find ways to not feel those prejudices? Let's have the conversations. Let's open up. Let's embrace each other in a conversation. So I find that's really inspired that feeling for me. I know that much.
Yeah, and I guess I'm fascinated by where this simple thing that I came up with, that step by step, when I started it, it was just a small little thing, but how it's evolved in my own thinking to have such enormous potential, that I just see that this has the potential to open up so much for people in their own lives, and in community and in business. And so, and as I was developed into Chocolate and Coffee Breaks, it's starting to be used as a community to start new communities, to bring people together so that they can have the opportunity to work together and do something else that makes a difference. Yeah. So they're using what I do to make a difference, to make another difference on top of that. So that just thrills me.
That's an awesome ripple effect, and it's kind of a bit of a great segue into my next question. We've covered off a lot about what you do. Let's talk a little bit more about who you do it for. So, what's the grounding in it? There's been talk about business, of course. Let's sort of explore a little bit deeper about who you do it for. How has this actually emerged in terms of the ripple effect we just spoke of?
Who I do it for? Well, a lot of Chocolate and Coffee Day is for everybody. What's important to me with Chocolate and Coffee Day is that it's an opportunity for us as the silent majority, those who don't experience prejudice, to be able to step up and say that, hey, we don't want this in our world, that we want to live in a world where people are accepted for who they are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is it's across the board. So it's really hard for me to pinpoint that. So what I see important with my, where I've directed that to, has been with individuals who just feel like there must be something more I can do.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gives them the opportunity to share with others that this is important.
Mm-hmm.
So then that goes into workplaces and communities, wherever people can gather to make those statements. So in workplaces where they may be multi-racial, multi-religious, full of different cultures, but it gives them the opportunity to come together and say, and to recognise that,
mm-hmm.
or to open, if there has been issues, to open the doors to helping other people understand that, you know, that person over there that I haven't been able to connect with, hey, maybe I could have a conversation with them and connect with them.
Yeah.
So Chocolate and Coffee Day, it's always been hard for me to pinpoint who exactly I do it for, because it is a day where I like to open it up, and
mm-hmm.
it's my gift to the world.
Oh yeah, lovely.
And a lot of chocolate and coffee breaks is also on that level as well, because that was just kind of an extension that people say to me, why are we having Chocolate and Coffee Day? Why can't it be every day?
Mm.
You know, not just this one day a year. So that's where I expanded and started to create a lot of resources around how people could use chocolate and coffee as within community, within the opportunities to do that, to start communities or to reconnect or reach out to more people.
To go back to something, and I wonder if we might be able to just explore, maybe to help the audience understand a little bit more about how the actual day came to pass. What was the inspiration behind the actual creation? It's one thing to have a fabulous idea. Typically, there's a really meaningful inspiration behind it. How did the actual Harmony Day come to pass so that it started as a day? What was the lead up to that?
Yes, so Chocolate and Coffee Day for Religious Harmony. It started from the Lindt Chocolate Cafe siege in Sydney in 2014. It was, I'm sure most of our listeners have heard of that, when a gunman went in claiming that it was a jihadist act and took hostages. And in the conclusion to that, 2 innocent people and the gunman did pass away. After that, there was this whole feeling of we just didn't know how people were going to respond. And the Muslim community were quite afraid that there would be retaliation against them, although they obviously had nothing at all to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of them were taking off their religious garb, or they weren't leaving home. Were afraid to get on public transport. And what happened was 150,000 people filled social media with the hashtag I will ride with you.
Yeah.
So instead of it being a hate fest, it was this great feeling of people pouring out love and acceptance for these people who obviously had nothing to do with it. But so instead of being afraid, they were brought into the community, and people just kind of saw through. We weren't going to go down that line of terrorist and all the stuff that had happened previously in other places. We were going to go from a place of love and acceptance. So this is something that deeply touched me. And I just thought about it constantly the following year until it got to around October. And I said to my mum, when's chocolate and coffee day? Because it had been so much on my mind. When's chocolate and coffee day? And she just responded with, I don't know. I've never heard of it. And I was just like, this moment, it was just like, I'm going to have to do this. This is obviously for me to start. I have to make this difference. So then I started Chocolate and Coffee Day for Religious Harmony, which is December 15th of every year. And just with that concept of reach out to someone who is different to you and sharing chocolate, coffee, and conversation. So find someone who's different, invite them for a chocolate and coffee, someone you haven't been able to connect with, and share with them. And that also did start in different workplaces and communities at the same time, where people were just having those conversations. At that point, it was, okay, let's have the conversations about accepting other people and becoming more inclusive. So that's the start of it. And so Chocolate and Coffee Day for Religious Harmony has very much been my thing for almost, this is coming up to the 6th year.
Wow. Yeah.
So I get really very vocal on it on social media at the moment. So that's my focus. But then Chocolate and Coffee Breaks is just kind of becomes not just religious, about all types of connections and ways of growing together as a community.
Yeah, fantastic. That's really a powerful interpretation of how to respond to a situation. And I say that because just before we started recording this, I was sharing that my experience when I'd heard about the cafe seizure was I was quite shocked, like a lot of people, and just devastated that it should happen. And yet for me, my way of responding to that was to buy a lot of Lindt chocolate and share with my family at Christmas time, to say, you know, this is on behalf of those people, and to let everybody know that we just can't be affected by this in a negative way. We must come together. And yet here you are making an actual national movement about it, and one that's potentially got to go global. And it just shows that one person can make a difference. And it segues a little bit into the next question, which is, why do you do it? We have covered a little bit of it, but maybe just dig a little bit deeper. Why did you want to start this? What's the reason behind it?
Well, I call this my beyond the why moment, because I'm a white Christian woman who was brought up in the White Australia policy era. I have not ever been the victim of prejudice. So what do I know about it? I know nothing about prejudice. But here I am, I'm going, I fight against it. It reaches into me and just goes, eh. So whenever I hear the stories about prejudice, something just clicks off on me.
Yeah.
So beyond the why, because if I'd searched for a why, I would have never done this. And I'm going to be honest with you here. I am not an initiator. I'm not I come up with great ideas, but I don't actually make them happen. So this is how powerful it is when you find a beyond the why moment. And that moment when I said to my mum, that I spoke to my mum and I went, damn, I have to do this. It was, that's not me. But this is something that is so strong, so powerful within me, that I go past what I would naturally do and make it happen.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it probably could have been a lot bigger by now if I was an initiator. However, it's taking its growth and growing organically, which is fine by me.
Yeah. No, I think you explained that really, really, really beautifully. It's really important that, I think, for any of our listeners, that there may be something kind of simmering down inside that says, I want to do something, I want to make a difference, but I'm not a very good this, or I'm not very good at that, or I don't do this well, and I'm not normally like that. But we can find that moment in time that is beyond us, where we really kind of realize we're the I suppose not so much a catalyst for change, but more so maybe the there's a word that'll come to me. I'm sure it'll come to me at 3 o'clock in the morning, but it's that sense where you know that it's beyond you. It's got to come through you. You're not really, it's not just about you. It's about what you can do as the voice of, or to be the initiator of something, as you say, being the initiator. These conversations that I find, it only takes one person just to find that bigger than me moment. It's not just about me, it's bigger than me, or as you say, it's beyond the why. And I think you explained that really well. And I just want all of our listeners and anyone who watches this to realize that if you've got something that's simmering below or burning inside of you, or just that little niggly voice that says you can do this, trust in that. There is something that will come to you. Follow that instinct, because we need more of you to be able to step up and make a difference and embrace humanity and be there for our global village. I think that's something that your message is resonating for me, certainly.
Yeah. And it's daunting for a lot of people when they stop and think about that. Think about actually starting something and doing something. But you don't have to think about the big overall global picture.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you can touch one person's life, you have changed the world.
Yep, absolutely.
And that one person, if you touch one person's life, what happens to them? And this is one of the things that I talk about with Chocolate and Coffee Day, or Chocolate and Coffee Breaks. If you were to sit down and have a conversation with one person and listen to their story, you've allowed them to feel accepted, give them a sense of belonging, and from there they want to contribute to the world. So if one person's not feeling accepted and suddenly they feel that from you, how does that influence their life?
Yeah.
They go home, their relationships with their family can change, the way they bring up their children can change, the way they interact at work, in the community can change. And then that one person, that's going to change, like, you imagine that's going to change their way the children grow up. And what influence is that going to make on the world? That one person influenced is just phenomenal. And that's what I call authentic influence, because
Absolutely.
you're influencing from the heart, and you're just being yourself and listening to somebody, giving them the opportunity to feel accepted. It's so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a message that I think we all needed to hear. And I really hope that the people that get a chance to watch the YouTube interview, or to listen to it via the podcast, will actually really feel that and resonate with it. And really the message is you're not too small. One person can make a massive difference, even if it's not that you end up being the big difference maker. You may influence the person who becomes, but you've just made a big difference to humanity by doing that. And I think any ripple effect that is a positive and authentic ripple effect, I'd love to just shower in that every day. I think that's what we need. And I think this is the time of the earth screaming for it. And I think, it's wonderful to have these conversations, to know that just our conversation today, Andrea, could be enough to motivate somebody, or to push that somebody just that little step further toward taking that next step and reaching out and doing something for the greater good. So I always enjoy these conversations.
Yeah, and I would hope that was part of it, that's the result too. And I think that's also part of the beauty of Chocolate and Coffee Breaks, is that people can see how simple it is. It is such a simple idea. So no idea, no matter how simple or how insignificant, goes without being a powerful influencer in the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I have these moments when, like on the festival that we were on, and I'm listening to everyone else's stories and what they're doing in the world, and I think, and I have this tiny humble foolish moment, and I'm thinking, I'm just talking about chocolate and coffee. And But the reality is, it's where things start. It's the start of things. And if people can't connect with each other, nothing else is going to work.
Absolutely. And to echo on that, we're talking about, we're part of the festival, and there's so many people doing what seemed, in my mind, looking at some of the achievements they've had, like mind-blowing. And I guess I just want to provide a little sense of feedback to you about that humbleness. It might seem so humble and small and maybe, oh, I'm not really doing that much. But you just told the story itself, and I just want to reflect that back to you. You may be just influencing that one person with a coffee and chocolate break that makes a massive difference and goes out and does something else, but you're doing it in such a way that it's lots of littles, and lots of littles builds up to be massive. So I think what you're doing is quite amazing, and I know without a doubt that anyone who tunes into this is going to feel a real sense of possibility just by hearing this conversation today. And I want to finish off by just sort of rounding out where people can find you. So what I will do is include the links below the YouTube video and also in the podcast, so people can actually tune in and click on the links to find you. But is there anywhere in particular you'd like people to look you up?
They can look me up wherever they like. I'm really easy to find because I'm the one and only Andrea Putting in the world. So chocolateandcoffeebreaks.com, you can go there and you can download a resource pack, which will give you, there's masses of information on chocolate and coffee breaks, and also chocolate and coffee day. So they can go there. I do a podcast, which is very similar to Voice on Fire, called Social Mission Revolution, where I get to talk to people who have social missions themselves, who are making a big difference in the world. But of course, you can find me, Andrea Putting, on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, anywhere. So easy to find. I have, of course, my website, andreaputting.com, as well.
Awesome. So you mentioned about the resource pack. So that means that if someone wants to host their own chocolate and coffee break, they can actually download the pack and kind of work out, from that pack how to host the day and make something of it within their own environment.
Absolutely. And there is a lot of material there. So for chocolate and coffee breaks, if you wanted to go somewhere and do it, there's a whole lot of information and whatnot there. And I created a set of cards, and I haven't had any more printed up, but these are conversation starters, and I have all of the questions from my conversation starters in there as well. So if you want to be able to have some ideas of some questions that you can use, they are on there. And how to do it, different ideas of workplaces, communities, the chocolate and coffee day. If somebody wants to have a chocolate and coffee break in a workplace, in a corporate setting, which helps people to reconnect with teams and develop new ideas, they can also connect with me on that level. But I'm always happy to talk to people about their ideas, and if they want to look through that and have questions, I am open to anyone coming back to me and saying, hey, what do you think about this? Or what does this mean? Or how can I do this? I'm happy to have a conversation around that.
Fantastic. Awesome. It sounds really, really amazing. And I'm wowed and impressed. I think it's a fantastic way to incorporate chocolate and coffee into a conversation and to change the world. I think that's just amazing. So one last question to finish out our interview today. What's your one big wish for humanity?
My one big wish is that people connect with each other and find love and acceptance for who the next person is. Through that, all things are possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally. I think that's a wonderful vision to have. And I think that we're all starting to see some movements where we're beginning to say, you know, it's time for that. And I think if we can all be part of that, what a wonderful world we have a chance to create. I think that's something we can all feel good about. So, Andrea, it's been fabulous. Thank you so much for your time today for this conversation. I think it's just been a really wonderful conversation about chocolate, coffee, and community and conversation and making a difference in the world. So thank you so much for sharing your time today.
Thank you so much, Terry, for having me on Voice on Fire.
My pleasure. You're watching or listening to Voice on Fire, interviews with intention. If you're new to Voice on Fire interviews, you'll hear from everyday amazing people on a mission to make a difference. These people are change agents, action takers, and difference makers, having a positive impact on their local community or across our global village. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell for updates on new interviews. I hope you enjoy.